On the morning of my 63rd birthday, my daughter called me and said something I will carry for the rest of my life. "Dad, Brian thinks it would be better if you didn't come around anymore. He says you make the kids uncomfortable." I stood in my kitchen in Savannah, Georgia, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, and I felt the floor shift beneath me. Not literally, but something inside me tilted. Something structural. Something that had been holding the weight of every sacrifice I'd ever made for that girl. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just said okay and hung up the phone. That afternoon, I walked into a barbershop I'd never been to before and sat down in a chair that wasn't mine. The barber, a man I'd never met, looked at me and said, "You look like you need more than a haircut." I laughed, because I didn't know what else to do. 4 years later, that barber stood beside me at my granddaughter's baptism, and my daughter finally understood what she had thrown away. Thank you for being here and taking the time to listen. Please leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. A quick note before we begin. This story contains some fictional elements for storytelling and learning purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals or places is purely coincidental, but the message at its core is absolutely true. My name is Harold Mitchell. I turned 63 that March, and I'm 67 now. Telling you this from the other side of 4 years I never expected to live through. I was a retired electrician, 41 years of pulling wire through walls, reading blueprints, standing on ladders in August heat, until my knees gave out and the union said it was time. I'd saved enough to be comfortable, not wealthy, but I owned my house outright, a small 2-bedroom place on a quiet street in Savannah, with a screened-in porch and a garden I was still learning how to tend. My wife, Patricia, passed away 8 years before this story begins. Breast cancer. 14 months, from diagnosis to the end. I held her hand the whole way, and when it was over, I didn't know who I was without her. I had 2 children. My daughter, Nicole, was 38 that year. She'd married Brian Carmichael when she was 29, a real estate developer from Charlotte who wore expensive watches and talked about square footage like it was poetry. They had 2 kids, Lily, who was 7, and Owen, who was 4. My son Marcus was 35, living in Portland, Oregon. He was a good kid. We talked on the phone every few weeks, but he had his own life, his own world, and Portland was a long way from Savannah. Nicole had always been the one I was closest to. After Patricia died, Nicole would drive down from Charlotte every other month. We'd sit on the porch and drink sweet tea, and she'd tell me about the kids, about her life, about Brian's latest development project. I lived for those visits. I arranged my whole calendar around them. I turned down fishing trips with my buddy Carl because Nicole might be coming that weekend. I kept the guest room spotless. I stocked the refrigerator with things Lily and Owen liked, juice boxes and string cheese and those little yogurt cups with the cartoon characters on them. But somewhere around the time Owen turned 3, things started to change. The visits got shorter, then less frequent. Nicole would call to cancel with reasons that sounded rehearsed, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. "Brian's got a work thing. The kids have activities. Maybe next month, Dad." I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They get busy. They have their own families. That's how it works. You raise them, and you let them go, and you hope they come back when they can. But there was something else happening. Something I couldn't name yet. Brian was happening. I'd never liked Brian, if I'm being honest. Not disliked him exactly, but I never trusted the smoothness. He was the kind of man who shook your hand while looking over your shoulder to see if someone more important had walked in. At family dinners, he'd steer every conversation back to himself, his deals, his connections, his plans to flip this property or develop that lot. Patricia had noticed it first, years ago. "That man collects people like assets," she told me once, "and when they stop being useful, he liquidates them." Patricia was always smarter than me about people. The birthday call came on March 14th. I'd been up since 6, which was normal. I'd made coffee, fed the cat, a fat orange tabby named Biscuit that Patricia had adopted the year before she got sick. I'd been planning to drive over to Carl's place later and maybe grill some burgers. Nothing fancy, You stop expecting birthday parties after 60. When Nicole's name appeared on my phone, I actually smiled. She remembered. That was something. That was enough. But the voice on the other end wasn't the daughter I knew. It was careful, controlled. The voice of someone delivering a message they'd been coached to deliver. Dad, I need to talk to you about something. Sure, sweetheart. Everything okay? Brian and I have been discussing it, and we think it would be better if you didn't come around as much. Brian says you make the kids uncomfortable. He thinks your house is, well, it's not really set up for children. And you can be a little, I don't know, intense sometimes. I set my coffee mug down on the counter. Biscuit rubbed against my ankle, oblivious. Intense, I repeated. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Nicole, I rebuilt the back bedroom for those kids. I put in a bunk bed. I child-proofed every outlet in this house. I know, Dad, but Brian feels strongly about this, and I need to support my husband. There it was. Brian feels strongly. Not Nicole feels. Not we decided together. Brian feels strongly, and Nicole had been trained to translate his feelings into her words. What about Lily's birthday next month? I asked. She asked me to come. She called me herself. There was a pause. I heard something in the background. A man's voice, low and insistent. Brian was right there, listening, directing. We'll figure something out, Nicole said, which meant no. I have to go, Dad. Happy birthday. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that. Biscuit meowed at me, demanding breakfast. Outside, the March sun was warming up the garden, and the azaleas were starting to bloom the way they always did in Savannah. Excessive and beautiful, like the city was showing off. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 10 minutes ago. But I was different. I didn't call Carl. I didn't grill burgers. I sat on my porch in Patricia's rocking chair, the one I'd never been able to bring myself to move, and I watched the light change across the yard. By evening, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to chase my daughter. I wasn't going to beg for access to my own grandchildren. I wasn't going to spend whatever years I had left waiting by the phone for someone to decide I was worth an hour of their time. I was going to get a haircut. I don't know why that was the thing that occurred to me. Maybe because I'd been cutting my own hair for 2 years with a pair of clippers in the bathroom mirror. And something about that suddenly felt unbearably sad. A man alone in a small bathroom, trying to make himself presentable for no one. So the next morning, I drove to a barbershop on East Broad Street. I'd passed 100 times but never entered. The sign said Ray's Classic Cuts in faded red letters, and through the window I could see an older black man sweeping the floor while a radio played something with horns. I walked in. The bell above the door chimed. The man looked up from his sweeping and studied me the way a mechanic studies an engine. Professionally, thoroughly, without judgment. Walk in? He asked. If you've got time. I've always got time. Sit down. His name was Raymond Price. Ray. He was 68 years old. A retired Navy man who'd opened the barbershop 20 years ago because, as he put it, I spent 30 years taking orders, and the only order I want to take now is how short you want it on the sides. He had hands that were steady and precise, the hands of someone who'd learned discipline early and never let it go. And he had a way of talking that made you feel like you were the only person in the room, even when the shop was full. He draped the cape over me and started working, and for a few minutes neither of us said anything. The radio played, the scissors clicked, and then Ray looked at me in the mirror and said it. You look like you need more than a haircut. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the kindness in his voice. Maybe it was the fact that a stranger had noticed something my own daughter had chosen to ignore. But I told him. I told him about Nicole, about Brian, about the birthday call. I told him about Patricia, about the empty house, about cutting my own hair in the bathroom mirror. I told him about the bunk bed I'd built, and the juice boxes in the refrigerator, and the granddaughter who'd called to invite me to her birthday party, only to have that invitation quietly erased. Ray listened without interrupting. He finished the haircut, brushed the loose hair from my neck, removed the cape, then he walked to the front door, flipped the sign from open to closed, and sat down in the chair next to mine. My son died in Afghanistan. Ray said. 4, 2009. IED outside Kandahar. He was 24. He paused. After that, I had a choice. I could let the grief eat me alive, or I could build something. So I built this shop, and I built a life around it. People come in here every week, Harold. Some of them need a haircut. Some of them need a friend. Some of them need a father. And I've learned that family isn't always the people who share your blood. Sometimes it's the people who share your chair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. On the back, he'd written an address in neat block letters. Every Saturday morning, a group of us meets at this address. Veterans, retirees, a few younger guys who just need somewhere to be. We call it the Saturday Circle. We drink coffee, we talk. Sometimes we fix things for people in the neighborhood who can't afford a handyman. You don't have to come, but you're welcome. I took the card. I put it in my wallet. I thanked Ray, paid for the haircut, and drove home. I put the card on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker where I'd see it every morning. And for 3 days, I looked at it without picking it up. On the 4th day, Saturday, I drove to the address. It was a community center on the south side, an old brick building with a basketball court out back and a parking lot that needed repaving. Inside, about 15 men sat in folding chairs arranged in a rough circle. Ray was there, of course. He waved me over and introduced me like I was someone worth knowing. Everyone. This is Harold. He's an electrician, retired, and he makes terrible decisions about haircuts, which is how we met. They laughed. A man named Curtis offered me coffee from a thermos. Another man, Hank, asked if I knew anything about wiring a ceiling fan because he'd been fighting with one for 2 weeks. A younger guy named Devin, maybe 30, sat quietly in the corner, and I later learned he'd just come home from his 3rd deployment and was trying to figure out who he was outside of a uniform. I fixed Hank's ceiling fan that afternoon. It took 45 minutes. He tried to pay me, and Ray told him to put the money away. That's not how this works, Ray said. Harold fixed your fan. Next week, you'll fix somebody else's something. That's the deal. That was the deal. And it was the simplest, most honest transaction I'd experienced in years. The Saturday Circle became my anchor. Every week, I showed up. I fixed things, electrical problems mostly, but I also painted a widow's porch, helped Curtis replace a water heater, and taught Devin how to wire a 3-way switch, which he found unreasonably satisfying. In return, Ray cut my hair for free. Curtis's wife Denise started sending me home with containers of gumbo and cornbread, and Hank, who turned out to be a retired carpenter, helped me rebuild my back porch when the boards started rotting. But it was Ray who changed me. Not through any grand gesture or profound speech, but through consistent, deliberate presence. He called me every Wednesday evening, not to ask for anything, just to check in. How's the week, Harold? And he'd listen, really listen, the way Patricia used to, giving my words weight, treating my small life like it mattered. One evening, about 3 months in, Ray invited me to Sunday dinner at his house. He lived in a neat bungalow near Forsyth Park with his wife, Gloria, a retired schoolteacher who had strong opinions about everything and expressed them all, with a warmth that made you feel included rather than corrected. Their daughter, Janine, was there with her husband, Andre, and their 2 kids, a boy named Miles, who was 9, and a girl named Zoe, who was 6. Zoe had Gloria's smile, and Miles had Ray's quiet intensity. And watching them together around that dinner table, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. It wasn't my family, I knew that, but it felt like something close, something real. The Sunday dinners became regular. Once a month, then twice, then every week. Gloria always set a place for me, and if I ever tried to skip, she'd call and say, "Harold Mitchell, that pot roast isn't going to eat itself, and I made it specifically for you, so get in your car." I learned not to argue with Gloria. Miles started calling me Mr. Harold, then just Harold. Then one Sunday, unprompted, he looked up from his mashed potatoes and said, "Can I call you Grandpa Harold?" My other grandpa lives in Florida, and we never see him. I looked at Ray. Ray nodded, just barely. I'd like that, I said. Zoe followed suit within the week. And suddenly, I was a grandfather again. Not by blood, but by choice. By showing up, by being the man who fixed the loose railing on their treehouse, and taught Miles how to throw a spiral and let Zoe paint my fingernails bright purple, because she said it would make me more handsome. I didn't hear from Nicole for 11 months. 11 months of silence. No calls, no texts. Not even on Thanksgiving or Christmas. I sent gifts for Lily and Owen, packages carefully wrapped and mailed to Charlotte. I never received confirmation they arrived. I sent Nicole a birthday card in June. No response. I sent a Father's Day text. Nothing. Marcus called from Portland and told me he'd confronted Nicole about it. She said Brian thought it was best to limit contact. Marcus was angry. But Portland was far away, and Marcus had his own battles, a demanding job, a new relationship he was navigating. I told him not to worry about me. I told him I was fine, and for the first time in a long time, that wasn't entirely a lie. The call came on a Thursday in February, 14 months after the birthday conversation. I was at the barbershop, not for a haircut, but because Ray and I had started playing chess on slow afternoons. I was losing. As usual, my phone rang. Nicole. Ray looked at me over the chessboard. I looked at the phone. I answered. Dad. Her voice was different. Smaller. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Brian and I are going through some things. Financially. The market turned, and a couple of his projects fell through. We're behind on the mortgage. I waited. He lost the development deal in Asheville, and the bank is calling about the loan on the Charlotte property. Dad, we need help. How much? 80,000. I closed my eyes. Across the board, Ray watched me without speaking. He didn't know what was being said, but he knew my face, and he knew enough. Nicole, the last time we spoke, you told me Brian didn't want me around your children. You told me I make them uncomfortable. That was 14 months ago, and I haven't heard from you since. Dad, that's not fair. I was in a difficult position. You were in your kitchen, and your husband was standing next to you, telling you what to say. Silence. I'm not giving you $80,000, Nicole. So you're going to punish me? Punish your grandchildren? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm telling you that I'm not a bank. I'm your father, and you treated me like I was disposable. You can't make me disappear for 14 months and then bring me back when you need a check. Brian said you'd say that. He said you'd hold a grudge. Brian was wrong about a lot of things. This isn't a grudge, Nicole. This is a boundary. She hung up, not with anger exactly, but with the sharp click of someone who'd expected a different answer and didn't have a backup plan. I set the phone down on the edge of the chessboard. Ray moved his bishop and said, Your move, Harold. I think I just made it. I know, Ray said. And it was the right one. After that call, things accelerated. Marcus told me that Nicole and Brian were struggling badly. Brian's real estate empire, such as it was, had been built on leverage and optimism, and when both collapsed, there was nothing underneath. Nicole called Marcus twice, asking him to talk to me. Marcus told her to call me herself, and to start with an apology. She didn't. Instead, 5 months later, she sent me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, which surprised me. It was 2 pages long, and it said many things, some of them true, some of them the kind of half-truth that people tell when they're desperate. She said Brian's behavior had been controlling. She said she hadn't realized how much she'd let him dictate her relationships. She said she missed me. She said Lily asked about me constantly, and Owen had kept one of the birthday cards I'd sent and slept with it under his pillow. That part broke me. I sat on the porch with that letter and cried, the first time in months. Biscuit jumped into my lap and purred, and I let the tears come because some pain deserves to be felt, not managed. But I didn't call her. Not yet. I showed the letter to Ray the next Saturday. He read it carefully, twice, and handed it back. What do you think? I asked. I think she's in pain, and I think some of this is real. But Harold, I've known men who got letters like this from people who only remembered them when the money ran out. You have to decide if she's reaching for you or reaching for your wallet. How do I tell the difference? Time, Ray said. Time is the only honest test. So I waited. I wrote Nicole back, a short letter. I told her I loved her. I told her I was glad she was starting to see things clearly. And I told her that if she wanted a relationship with me, it had to start with showing up. Not with a crisis. Not with a request. Just with presence. I told her she could come to Savannah whenever she wanted. No conditions, no expectations, just two people trying to rebuild something that had been broken. She didn't come for 3 months. And then, one Saturday morning in October, I was at the community center with the Saturday Circle when the door opened, and there she was. Nicole, thinner than I remembered, with circles under her eyes and Lily holding her hand. Owen was on her hip, bigger now, almost too heavy to carry. She stood in the doorway and looked at me, and I looked at her, and for a moment the whole room went quiet. Then Lily broke free and ran to me. "Grandpa," she yelled, and she hit me with the force of a 7-year-old who had not hugged her grandfather in almost 2 years. I held her so tight. I held her and I felt Owen's hand reach out from Nicole's arms and grab my shirt, and then Nicole was there too. All of us tangled together in the doorway of a community center on the south side of Savannah, while 15 men in folding chairs pretended not to watch. Ray walked over. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, simply, "Harold, introduce us to your family." And that was the beginning, not the end, because healing isn't a single moment. It's a series of choices made over time. Nicole came to Savannah once that month, then twice the next. She left Brian in December, moved into a small apartment in Savannah with the kids, while she figured things out. I didn't give her $80,000, but I helped her find a job. Gloria, Ray's wife, connected her with a friend who managed a property office downtown. Curtis's wife, Denise, watched the kids on afternoons when Nicole worked late. The Saturday Circle rallied around her the way they'd rallied around me, not with charity, but with community. Lily and Owen met Miles and Zoe, and within a week, they were inseparable, running through Ray's backyard like they'd known each other their whole lives. Owen started calling Ray Grandpa Ray without anyone suggesting it, and Ray, who'd lost his own son 15 years ago, had to leave the room for a moment when he heard it. The baptism happened in April, 6 months after Nicole moved to Savannah. It was Zoe's baptism at the little church on Habersham Street, where Ray and Gloria had been members for 20 years. Janine asked me to be there. Specifically asked. Said Zoe wanted Grandpa Harold in the front row. I wore the suit Patricia would have picked for me, navy blue, and I stood between Ray and Gloria in a church full of people who had become my family through nothing more than the daily decision to show up for each other. Brian came. I hadn't expected that. He drove down from Charlotte, showed up at the church in one of his expensive suits, now slightly too big on him, and stood in the back like he was waiting for someone to tell him where he belonged. Nicole saw him first. Her face went tight, and she moved closer to me instinctively, like she was positioning herself behind a wall she trusted. After the ceremony, during the reception in the church fellowship hall, Brian approached me. He looked smaller than I remembered. The confidence that had always filled the room before him had evaporated. What was left was just a man, middle-aged and frightened, and trying to figure out what had gone wrong. "Harold," he said. "Brian, Nicole won't return my calls. I came because I heard about the baptism from her mother. I just want to talk to her, to see the kids. That's between you and Nicole. I know you think I'm the villain here." He gestured around the room, at Ray and Gloria and Curtis and Denise and all the people who had become the architecture of my new life. "I know you've got all this now. Your little community. Your new family. It's not little," I said. "And it's not new. It's what happened when I stopped waiting for people to decide I was worth loving and started being around people who already had." Brian's jaw tightened. "I never told Nicole to cut you off. You told her I made the kids uncomfortable. You told her my house wasn't set up for children. You told her I was too intense. And she believed you because she loved you and she trusted you. And you used that trust to isolate her from the one person who would have told her the truth about how you were treating her." He didn't deny it. That was the most honest thing Brian had ever done in my presence. I made mistakes, he said. You did. I want to fix things. Then fix them. But not here, and not through me. Go to Nicole directly. Be honest. Accept whatever she decides. And Brian, if you're only here because you're lonely and your money is gone and you need someone to blame or someone to save you, then turn around and drive back to Charlotte. Because these people. I looked at Ray, who was watching from across the room with his arms folded, steady as always. These people taught me what it means to show up without an agenda, and I won't let anyone bring an agenda into this space. Brian looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at Nicole, who was standing with Lily and Owen near the dessert table, laughing at something Gloria had said. He looked at his children, healthy and happy, and surrounded by people who loved them, and I saw the moment it hit him. The realization that this world had been built without him, that it functioned beautifully in his absence, that the family he'd tried to control had simply found a different shape, one that didn't include him. He left without speaking to Nicole. She watched him go from across the room, and when he was gone, she walked over to me and took my hand. Are you okay? She asked. I am, I said. Are you? Getting there. She squeezed my hand. Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. For listening to him instead of listening to you. For the birthday call. For the silence. For the money call. For all of it. I know. You built something beautiful here. We built it, I said. All of us. And you're part of it now. You and Lily and Owen. Not because you came back, but because you chose to. That's the difference, sweetheart. That's always been the difference. Ray appeared beside us, holding a plate piled high with Gloria's pound cake. He offered it to Nicole, who took a piece and smiled. Your father, Ray said to Nicole, walked into my barbershop on the worst day of his life, and the man I met that day was broken, lonely, and convinced he didn't matter. 4 years later, he's standing in a church surrounded by people who love him. You know what changed? Nicole shook her head. He did, Ray said. He stopped chasing people who ran from him and started walking toward people who welcomed him. That's not revenge. That's wisdom. And wisdom is the calmest kind of strength there is. That evening, after the baptism reception was over and the fellowship hall was cleaned up and everyone had gone home, I sat on my screened-in porch in Patricia's rocking chair. Biscuit was in my lap. The Savannah night was warm, and somewhere down the street, I could hear someone playing a guitar, loose and easy, the kind of playing that happens when someone isn't performing but just enjoying the sound. I thought about Patricia. I thought about what she would say if she could see me now. A 6, 7-year-old man with a cat and a garden and a screened-in porch full of memories, surrounded by a family he'd found in the most unexpected places. I think she would have laughed. I think she would have said, "Took you long enough, Harold." Tomorrow was Sunday. There would be dinner at Ray and Gloria's house. Gloria was making her pot roast, the one she claimed to make specifically for me but actually made because it was Ray's favorite and she liked having an excuse. Miles and Zoe would be there, and now Lily and Owen would be too. Nicole would bring a salad because Gloria had told her that every guest brings something and no one sits idle in her house. Marcus was flying in from Portland next week for a visit, his first time meeting the Price family. I'd already warned Ray that Marcus would ask him 100 questions about the Navy, and Ray had said, "Good, I've got 100 answers." I sat there, rocking gently, Biscuit purring against my chest, and I thought about the man I'd been 4 years ago, a man who stood in his kitchen on his birthday and heard his daughter tell him he wasn't wanted, a man who'd been cutting his own hair alone in a bathroom mirror, a man who believed that family was something you could lose and never get back. I'd been wrong. Family is not something you lose. Family is something you find over and over again in barbershops and community centers and Sunday dinner tables, in the steady hands of a man who cuts your hair and checks on you every Wednesday, in the strong voice of a woman who refuses to let you skip pot roast, in the arms of grandchildren who chose you because you chose them first. Patricia taught me how to love. Nicole taught me how to let go. And Ray taught me the thing I needed most. That showing up is the bravest thing a man can do. Not once, Not when it's convenient, but every single day. You show up for people, and eventually, the right people show up for you. If you're listening to this and you're alone, if someone in your family has told you that you're not wanted, if you're sitting in a quiet house wondering whether you matter, I want you to hear this. You matter, not because someone told you so, but because you exist, and existing is enough. Stop waiting for permission to belong. Walk into the barbershop, sit down in the chair, let someone see you, and when they offer you a seat at their table, say yes. That one word changed everything for me. It can change everything for you too. If this story touched you, please comment below with your thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for staying until the end. This story was mine, and I hope it reminded you that the family you deserve is still out there, waiting for you to walk through the door.